remember being physically sick in the gutter on my way to the office, but there's nothing you can do.
Why were you sick?
Because of some news I'd just received from the hospital, and you're not wanted at the hospital. It's not useful for you to be there. So the first thing I had to do is call my wife to tell her the thing that I'd been told. I recall for a couple of years arriving at those doors, then physically doing this, and then walking through the doors to try and deal with and separate what was going on at home versus at work.
By the age of 30, he was a father of 3 with a career path set in stone, then becoming CEO at Havas while dealing with massive pressures at home.
Yeah, that was one of the most frightening moments of my career, making that phone call.
What were you scared of?
It felt really, really counter to my principles. And the truth is, I went because I needed the money. And I was unashamed that my family was the most important thing at that point. I'd had my leaving do.
Oh, wow.
Left the agency, and then I walked back in a week later.
And everyone thought, oh no, he's lost his memory.
No, can you imagine how weird that is?
You don't work here anymore.
It was so weird. I realised that there's another way of leading. And by 18 months in, we become a runner-up in the campaign agency of the year. You know, we took Havas from nowhere to some big pitch wins. I think we came second in the campaign new business.
You're showing there is another way to do things, that you can be caring, you can be honest, you can be vulnerable, you can speak your mind and have a point of view without being an idiot.
By being truthful, you can enact the best policy, and you can always keep a clearer head when you choose to use honesty.
Amen.
Greetings, I'm Ashley Samuels Mackenzie,
And I'm Charles Parkinson,
and welcome to How I Became,
where we unveil the unscripted journeys of inspirational figures.
Hi, I'm Xavier Rees, and this is how I became Group CEO at Havas Creative in the UK.
Born into a clash of two worlds, our guest's story begins. Although living in a world of contrasts can sometimes make it hard to fit in. Being able to see early life in a way that most don't get to see. He was always reminded, just because you're lucky now doesn't mean you will always be. By the age of 30, he was a father of 3 with a career path set in stone. Then becoming CEO at Havas while dealing with massive pressures at home. A man with many perspectives to share. So let's leave no more minutes wasted. Introducing Xavier Rees, Group CEO of Havas Creative UK.
I love it.
Welcome.
Thank you.
So Havas, a French advertising agency. Let's just give, for those watching who may be not in advertising or want to know about Havas, this company you're part of, one of the largest integrated marketing agencies in the world, made up of 316 offices located in 75 countries, 11,000 employees globally. You are UK Group CEO of Havas Creative. Tell us, give people what is the structure of Havas? Where do you fit into that? What's your responsibility?
Yeah, for sure. So Havas is one of the world's largest global advertising networks, for want of a better phrase. We're proudly one of the smallest, and I say proudly because I think it makes us fleet of foot, and we feel like we're where we need to be, not every single location on the planet. Havas is split into 3 sort of verticals, if you like: Havas Health, Havas Media, and Havas Creative Group. And I sit within Havas Creative Group in the UK, and I am responsible for around about 700-800 people in the UK. We're all focused on creating communications for our clients, whether that be advertising or customer experience, comms, social, you name it, PR. We cater for all briefs and across all disciplines. So that's who Havas are very broadly.
And Havas Creative is part of the Havas holding company, which is also massive organisation, approximately 2.4 billion in revenues in 2022.
Wow.
And the history. Anything about the history you can tell us?
Havas.
Yeah.
I'll probably get this wrong, but Havas. It's difficult if you're sitting in the UK to understand Havas's history. It's an almost 200-year-old organisation. I've had it described to me, whether this is factually correct or not, as it's kind of the French Reuters originally. It started as a news desk, I believe, but
I think it was the first ever news something. You carry on. I'll double check my stats.
So it has been there for a long time and has a real place in French business culture.
World's first news agency.
There you go.
Created in 1835.
There you go.
Wow.
The French Reuters. I kind of got it right. That's lucky, in case any of my bosses end up listening to this. But so yeah, and I think the other thing to say is within the French market, it's a very dominant brand and force as well. So, one of the jobs I sort of set myself was to create the same strength of reputation for Havas in the UK as it's got in France, which is often difficult outside a agency's home market. So,
well, we'll talk about how you're doing that and what you're doing, and you might know the work of Havas Creative. When it comes to Christmas, Have Your Elf a Merry Christmas is one of your pieces.
Indeed.
Bringing your favourite elf to the Asda store, amongst many other great things.
As an Asda colleague, most importantly, we put him to work in the stores.
Love that. Brilliant. Now, that's Havas. Gives context as to who you are and what you're doing. And now you. This is your story. This is how do you become the UK group CEO of such an organisation with so many people you're responsible for. I think there's 3 chapters to your life that we're going to walk through today. Chapter 1, the intriguing and uniquely challenging dynamic of your childhood, which I think has led to a lot of the things you push for today. Chapter 2, the challenge of managing personal and family challenges, all the while building your career and every year seemingly getting more and more responsibility and more other family members to deal with, the people you're working with almost. Chapter 3, how you made the leap to CEO and the unique and difficult circumstances under which you're in, again, personally, while making that transition. So we're going to explore all of that today. Let's take it back. Let's
do it.
Crystal Palace.
Yeah.
Where it all began. And I think a large part of your passion stems from, let me mention this too. 19th of April, 2023, you were announced as the new chair of the IPA Talent Leadership Group, where you will play a key part in shaping the IPA's mission to attract new and diverse talent into Adland while creating inclusive workplace cultures through the IPA and industry-wide initiatives. So this is something you're taking on a responsibility to improve in the industry. And I think we'll get onto that later, but I think a lot of this passion does stem from life growing up. So tell us about life at the beginning.
I would. Well, the first thing I would say is, it's nice of you to sort of frame it as a challenge. I would not describe my, my youth or upbringing as, as a very difficult or indeed unique challenge. But I guess where to start. We've talked about this before, but there's sort of 2 sides to my family. My mum is from North London, and my dad's from Sheffield, Yorkshire. And one parent is from a very working class background, and the other one's from a relatively posh or middle class background. And when I say that, everyone always thinks it's the northerner who's the working class one. But so there you see your first sort of piece of discrimination go on, because it's actually my mum who was brought up on a council estate up in Finchley, and shared a flat with her, with her mum and her nan, and my dad, who grew up in the suburbs of Sheffield, in a solicitor's family, sort of doing very well in the community and sort of relatively sort of pillars of that community, I suppose.
So what was that like growing up? Because you've got these 2 sides of your family which you spend time with both have lived a very different life experience. what was that like for you as an individual?
Well, I can only reflect on it now, right? Because at the time, it is what it is, and you don't know any different. You think, I don't know whether you think everyone's like that. Maybe you start to realise everyone's different quite early on, but you don't really understand that anything can be anything other than how it is for you. So my reflections are more exactly that, reflections from where I sit now on the things and stories that shape me there. But it was interesting because on the one hand I'd have family that were sort of stiff upper lip and talking in a certain way, and on the other hand I would have much what I would describe as much more grounded family who are prepared to be much more honest and say things how they are. But growing up in South London, which maybe we'll come on to in a minute, it was interesting because at primary school I was very much the poshest kid in the States primary, and then I went off to a private school and I was probably one of the least posh kids in the private school. So I don't want to pretend I have suffered or struggled, but it was always interesting being not quite centre of one place or other, always feeling slightly on the edges of both of them. I know lots of people have much greater reason to have felt on the edges than me, but that was interesting for me because I felt that part of my story was always I was leaning in on one bit or other rather than sort of being able to own it all. And one of the great things about sitting here with you, people being even remotely interested in this, so I can sort of bring it all out in the open now, and that's one thing I've always wanted to be very honest about, because actually the reality of my upbringing was it was very privileged. I just happened to have seen it through the eyes of of people who knew that it wasn't necessarily always like that. My nan and my mum still will say, clogs to clogs in 2 generations, Zav, don't, so I had this work ethic sort of built into my psyche from a very young age. Now it's unfair to say that wasn't, it was equally from both parents, but my mum was absolutely determined that we were going to move forward and I was going to make something of myself, and I think that was driven by the fact that that's what she'd had to do.
So you go to Dulwich College, that's where you went to school, right? And so you're going through this life experience of, and it's, I hear what you say that it's not a real life struggle, but at the time when you're 15 and you just want to fit in, it's hard. If you don't feel like, these aren't really my people, and I don't really feel like I fit in here. It's not easy, and I think that's what do you think that's done to shape who you are today?
I wouldn't have described it as a very creative environment. I mean, that's the first thing to say. I actually loved sport, but I wasn't very good at the sports that mattered. Rugby was what it was all about. I think I managed to make the third 15 for a couple of games, but mostly, I was sort of fourth 15, which if you use numbers, then it tells you you're at least sort of 45 people down the list before you get started. But that whole thing wasn't really me. I was actually, and again, a big part of my psyche, I suppose, is I see myself as a long distance runner. That was the sport I was good at.
And I resonate with that. I also ran for school long distance. It's not the coolest thing, let's be honest. If you're doing a 100-meter sprint, but doing 1500 or going cross country is not cool. But what it does do, if you're not into the academic side, occasionally you get half a day off school to go and enter competition, which was fun.
Exactly.
So you're in this very academic environment. You're not feeling it, but you're now a CEO. You must have smashed your A-levels and done really well. How did that go?
Well, not really. That's probably the best way of putting it. Or at least I didn't do as well as anybody thought I could or should have done. And
what did you get?
I got a B and 2 Ds, so very, very, very proudly. And then I retook one of the Ds and got a C.
It's a small upgrade. But what's your mum and dad saying at this time? Because you said your mum's really keen for you to make something of yourself and carry the family on. What are they thinking?
Yeah, well, I think I always remember my dad being really supportive and positive when I got my results, and that was actually quite an early formative experience for me because I was expecting him to tear me off a proper strip. And it was the first time I realised that he was going to support me to be me and to do whatever I wanted to do. I think, my mum was also supportive, I should say, but I think she was probably thinking, you bloody pain in the paid all this money and you need to be getting better grades than that, mate. That's definitely, which is probably fair, but that's, that's how it felt, I guess. But the problem is, none of it was any interest to me. I mean, actually, I did economics as an A-level, and that was the first time that anything at school had meant anything to me. I mean, it's hilarious now because I look at economics and think, well, it's all, most of it's theory. It's, it's sort of comes at life from an angle that, the economy and money drives everything, which is not, a fundamental belief I share. I mean, it's a key part of how the world goes round, obviously, but it's not the only part.
It's not how you run Havas, that's for sure, but we'll get to that.
But it was the only thing that resembled real life to me. And I happened to have a teacher at that point, who the first and only teacher that really shaped my life in any way, who, again, made it sound like real life, related to real life. And that had an impact on me as well. So I realised that, upon failing my A-levels and not doing as well in my retakes as I was allegedly supposed to do, that I was barking up the wrong tree. I'd applied to universities to do all these courses that everyone expected me to do, economics and politics and this and that. I had no passion. I was sort of just going through the motions, and so I decided to take a completely different path. I wanted to go and do something that was going to be relevant, so I went and did a business degree. Again, not surprising or original in this day and age, but I deliberately chose to go to a poly to do it instead of a university because the course was way more practical. In fact, I laugh now, but at the time they were very proud of the course because it was a BSc, not a BA. So it was coming at it from much more of a applied perspective than a sort of philosophical one, I guess.
Which I'm sure you enjoyed. You were about doing the work rather than the theory of it.
It's true, and it was all relevant to real life because it was real life. But also, you got to start thinking about different angles of it. So you spend time thinking about the ethics of the workplace, the ethics of business versus personal life, and the psychology of how people think and behave at work, and how the brain contributes to that, how biology contributes to that. So all kinds of different angles on it, which because it was all related to something real, all started to make sense to me. And it happened to be in Manchester in the early 90s, so that helped.
Nice. Very fun to be around Manchester then, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Fun stories from Manchester?
None of that I can probably tell. But, the Hacienda was no longer any good by that point. Okay. I went a couple of times, but there were other clubs that are much better. But spent a lot of my time in clubs, that is for sure. Those are stories for
another podcast.
Other
Sam's nightlife
related
early eras. So it's now known as Man Met. That's what it's now into.
It changed halfway through me being there. I was a bit pissed. Honestly, it was quite interesting because I was thinking, hold on a second, I've come here because it's a poly and because it's gonna, it's more vocational. Don't sort of just become another university. But there you go.
It works.
C'est la vie.
Your first job, assistant product manager at Boots?
Yeah.
So you didn't start in agency world. You started managing cards.
Yeah, greetings cards. More specifically, occasions and relations greetings cards. That got you on the edge of your seats now, right? Yeah.
Wow.
So at Boots, I was a product buyer. So I wasn't even in the the marketing communications department. But it was fascinating because they sold. I'll try and make it sound interesting to you for a minute, but they sold 1,500 different product lines of greetings cards in their biggest stores, and the profit margin is like 80% or something. So these, it's contributing disproportionately versus the shelf room to their revenues, and it was at the point where, this is how long ago it was, where they were moving from manually merchandised stuff, like people coming in from the suppliers and putting their own cards on the shelves, to digitally EPOS data being used to measure the sales, and then us choosing which cards are stocked, but also where and how they're displayed. So I had to sit there using one of those big mainframe computers with black screens with fluorescent green sort of migraine inducing text
Matrix
on them
style,
trying to do data analysis, and so every single number on each barcode on the back of a card was telling you, right, what occasion is it? Is it a birthday? Is it a funeral? Is it a wedding? Is it this, that, and the other? Has it got a teddy bear on it? Is the teddy bear facing you? Is it holding flowers, etc., etc.? And so you could choose which elements you analysed, and in doing so, you could watch the sale transform through your own actions. It was actually an amazing experience. Although, again, creatively stifling, I would say. The most definitely the most individual way of displaying your sort of creativity or anything else is to wear a Disney tie, which I refuse to submit to. But I just recall the people that thought they were a bit more interesting would use their ties to try and communicate something about themselves. And I look back on that now and think, if you've only ever worked in an agency, you probably take for granted the fact that you exist in an environment where you can genuinely be yourself.
Creatively stifling, but perhaps strategically stimulating, as you're able to then see how those actions affect something else.
Yeah, totally. And I guess maybe I'm being unfair because there is creativity required to analyse that data and think about how you're going to then use that to make different decisions. I suppose I maybe I mean more in the sense of expressing that personally and then through your through the work you then create. I never maybe wrongly never saw the greetings cards with teddy bears on it as particularly natural extension of my own sort of creative brain, but there you go, each to their own.
I get what you mean there. Yeah.
Then the world of advertising lands on your lap, or you enter into it. You go to Grey as your first ad agency.
Yeah, and important to say, I had done some summer jobs working for a tiny little sort of print production company sort of around London, where I would have to carry bromides from, funnily enough, I remember carrying bromides from the centre of the West End all the way over to, it's called Hoxton, Zav, but don't worry, it's okay, but just make sure you walk straight from the tube back to the tube again and don't talk to anybody. So at a time when Hoxton was still proper old East End. So yeah, I'd done that, and then I was applying for sort of new jobs, and I just had an interview. I think it was at Dixon's, and I went to meet a friend from college, and she was working for an agency. I'm not sure I really knew what agencies did, but I went to meet her. I think she was running late, so I went and sat in their reception room for a bit, and within 5 minutes, my eyes were just flicking about. It's just interesting people, a lot of movement, people wearing what they wanted, people were swearing and it was all right. That sounds ridiculous, but this sense of freedom and energy just oozed out of the place, even by just sitting in reception. And again, I think if you've only ever worked in agency, you might take that stuff for granted, but it couldn't have been more opposite to either the environment I've been in at Boots or any of the other places I was going for interviews. So
no people wearing Disney ties trying to be different.
There might have been somewhere, but I managed not to encounter them. So yeah, and I asked if there was I said, is there a job going, like that evening? And she said, funny enough, there is. And so I went for it.
And that was account manager?
Account exec.
Account exec.
In fact, I think it might be trainee account exec.
Nice. Started from the bottom.
Yeah.
Now you're here.
How did you manage in those first days? Was there a way you clued yourself up?
In my second week there, I decided I can't remember what I'd got passionate about. You might be able to find it. It's somewhere in Haymarket's sort of annals, but I wrote a letter to Marketing magazine, as it was then, and I showed it to my boss and said, "Are you all right if I write this letter to Marketing?" And I think they must have looked at me and thought, "You, you're sort of 2 weeks in, and you want to write a letter to, you know, the industry sort of magazine." Now, Marketing was much more the client's magazine, and Campaign was the agency one, and I didn't really know about Campaign, I suppose. So anyway, I bloody well wrote it, and they published it.
Nice.
So it was sort of next to the, you know, chief marketing officer from this brand and the, you know, MD of this agency, and then trainee account exec making a point about, I can't remember what, but so that you know, I just set about trying to make a nuisance of myself in a good way. I also overheard people going, "Oh God, mate, avoid. They do this sort of annual trip to the rugby with the clients. Like, make sure you don't get tapped up for that. You'll end up doing all the work." And I thought, sounds like I'm going to get in front of a load of senior people. So, like, if no one else wants to do it, I sort of just started asking questions about it. Sort of didn't want to I never liked putting myself forward. I just thought I'd show that I was interested, and sure enough, they probably realised they couldn't get anyone else to do it, and this bloke seemed interested, so he'll be easy picking. So I got to organise that, and then of course at the last minute someone pulled out, and then I got to go. So I got to go with the CEO and all the CMOs of all our clients to some fancy rugby match that that I wouldn't have got near for probably another 10 years if I'd not sort of put my all in, I guess. So I just sort of tried a bit of that stuff, and then I mean, I like to imagine I worked hard, but actually I didn't have a clue what I was doing. I had no idea how to do any of it, and I actually got really badly pulled up, quite rightly, because I used to go into meetings, not write any notes, and then come out and try and remember what was good. Someone pulled me aside once and went, "What happened in that meeting? Then tell me what." And I couldn't answer it properly, and as a result, it was pretty clear to me and to my boss that I wasn't doing my job properly. And so my life's full of little come-upances like that. Not because not for any reason, and I didn't probably realise that's what I should be doing, or probably didn't even realise it was my job to take the notes. But yeah, so I sort of, in some ways, ingratiated myself. In other ways, made myself look like I didn't know what I was doing. You sort of find your own way, find some ways of showing people you care and you're passionate. Make loads of mistakes. I think the most important thing is when you make mistakes, someone picks you up, is not to think that you know any better. I think that's probably the thing that stood me in good stead. I was always very down to earth. I remember my first job, which no longer makes my CV but did for a long time, was working in McDonald's, where I got no stars because I was so worried that you had to actually take a test to get a star, and I was so worried that I would fail it. I didn't want to take the test. But I remember going in there thinking, "Oh right, I'm going to try and sort of make my way here really quickly." And then I got flipping burgers, and I was so at it. It's a learned art, and this guy next to me, who I thought wasn't going to be able to teach me anything, was able to teach me a whole ton of stuff, and it was stuff I needed to learn really fast if I wasn't going to lose this job. And that combined with my upbringing really meant I went into the workplace being very grounded and knowing I didn't really know much. Still making a ton of mistakes, but making sure that when I made them, I really bloody listened.
That attitude obviously worked for you, because you joined Gray in 96, and then you moved to BBH, and you get to account director. So you're doing the right things. You're obviously taking on board feedback, not getting in a hump about it and going, "Okay, yeah, probably should take some notes in this meeting." And you rise and rise. And it's during your time at BBH that you have children. And you're, 26, 27 at this point?
Yeah.
It's quite young, isn't it?
Yeah, it was quite. Even now, I look back and think, crikey, that's young. I suppose at the time it all just happens to you, right? So I met my wife at at work. In fact, at Gray, so I was the account exec. She was the account director. That was not a very. I mean, there's a story in that in itself because, at first it's all sort of under wraps. No one's talking about it, and then we decided. I sort of went from my mates all sort of being impressed that I was going out with my boss to going, oh, don't talk about it like that. Excuse me, it's a serious relationship. And so when we decided it was a serious relationship, we decided we should tell people at work. And my wife got an absolute beasting off her bosses. She was told she would not be taken seriously. She was told that it would undermine all the good work she was doing, etc., etc. Now,
did you know this at the time?
Yeah. We were going through it together, right? And her response, quite rightly, was that doesn't necessarily seem to be the way it works for blokes around here. They seem to be quite freely able to not necessarily even go out with women who are half their age, and that's perfectly accepted by everybody. So again, I learnt quite early in my career that there was discrimination rife all over the place, and that was often perpetuated by in this instance by lots of the senior women, and that's another really important learning. A lot of discrimination, it can be perpetuated by the people who. Same kind of people are being discriminated against.
And how long did you get off when your kids are being born? How much time did you get on paternity leave?
2 weeks. 2 weeks. Obviously, the first week of that, I learned isn't that useful because your mother-in-law's around trying to sort of quite rightly busy herself. So the truth of it is, you sort of get a week with your new kid, and you're back to work.
Was that tough?
It wasn't tough because it was life, right? My wife had 3 months maternity leave, and I had 2 weeks off, and that was the way it was. I look back now and realise how fundamentally that shaped both of our lives and careers, my wife and my career. When you're in that position, let me speak personally, when we were in that position, when I was in that position, you make decisions about who's going to stay at home to look after the kids based on how much money you've got, and the amount of money you've got depends entirely whether the woman stays at home or the bloke stays at home, because if the bloke stays at home, you get 2 weeks pay. And if the woman stays at home, you get the 3 or 6 months. And of course, the legal entitlements take a year off. I wouldn't even have been allowed to keep my job and take a year off.
And we'll come back to what's interesting about this is you've got some quite unique paternity, initiatives at Havas, which you implemented. We're going to get to that.
Yeah, we'll get to that.
It's all relevant. And then you have 2 children in quite quick succession. How long between?
A year and 3 days.
A year and 3 days.
So my eldest was born in 2000 in July, and then swiftly a year and 3 days later, my second daughter was born.
So your experience is you have 2 weeks off when they're born, and you come back to work. Everyone goes, "Well done, mate. Congrats." Right, now we've got this project, and you get straight back into things,
totally.
Pretty much. What was it like for your wife from what you saw?
Let's start with what it's like for her and for me, because I'm coming back so quickly, right? So first of all, she's left straight on our own. Second of all, this is a very entitled male sort of story, right? But you have the privilege of not having to learn or deal with any of what's going on at home. So actually, my reflection is, and my wife would be quick to support me, I was a terrible husband and father in that period because I didn't have to do it. And you learned to do it sort of each evening when you got home for a bit, and then for a day or two at the weekend. But I was going to the football or playing football, one of those days each weekend. So I was doing it a day a week, and because that's normalised, you sort of that you just slip into it. So it was only really when, I sort of, once we'd had my second daughter, that I realised my life I needed to reshape my life so that I could be a better parent. But
And you're learning all this at the age of 27 as well, right?
Yeah. You're
still young. Yeah.
I was, and it was funny because my wife was older than me, so the decision to have kids was, felt natural for both of us for that reason. But yeah, I was the only one of my age having kids at that point, and I didn't mind though. You know what? The funny thing about that was, first of all, it's sort of the age my parents had kids, so I, at that point in time, you're sort of using that as a reference point as much as anything else. And second of all, I was always trying to appear at work as though I was older than I was or more senior than I was, so that I could get on.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I looked quite young. I was more, I was an account director at the age of 23 or 24 or whatever, which is, exceptionally young to be an account director. And I was looking for ways to demonstrate that I was to be respected and taken seriously. And that's not why we had kids, for sure. But it's very true that when you walk into a room and tell people you've got two kids, they tend to think you're older than 27. Even then, and particularly these days. So my wife had a really poor experience when she went back to work, particularly after our first child, and it said, quite quickly that she was pregnant again. She was ostracised. She was physically moved onto a desk away from the rest of the team and given different work to do.
Why?
Because she was only going to be around again for another 6 or 7 months. Now, that was bizarre to me. And I remember at the time being appalled, but she didn't, very typical of my missus, she didn't want to make a fuss of it. And then when she came back after our second child, the same sort of thing happened. So again, I watched very clearly the world behave in a way, and the industry behave in a way that valued women's contribution differently from men's, and women's contribution when they had children very differently than before they had children, and it made me really angry.
So we'll get to, as I said, we'll get to what you do about that now. Back onto your pathway to CEO. You moved to Wonderman as an account director in 2001.
Yeah.
And this isn't...
I think it was senior account director. That was very important to me at the time.
Let's make that
same difference.
That's very important. Senior account director. And you get to a bit of you're finding out who you are in this world and who you want to be and what character you are. You're still late 20s, and you sort of seem to hit this crossroads moment where you get some feedback from someone. Again, someone tells you, pulls you up and says something to you, and it seems to shape the next direction of what's really formed your leadership style, which is unique. You talk about yourself now as not an alpha type character, and you sort of start this psychological experiment almost on yourself. Tell us about what happens.
Well, the psychological experiment started probably earlier than that. I always thought I wanted my boss's job, but I never thought I could do it the way they did it. And therefore, I always doubted whether I could do it at all. I'd watch my bosses and think, the way that you're able to be really sort of aggressive or assertive and not care about how people feel about that. I'm really bad. I'm bad at that. The way you're able to hold a room, the way you're able to do all kinds of things, I'd look at it and go, blimey. The way people were super organised and that was their real strength. I had to work. I realised that being organised was really important. I actually worked hard at that because I knew it wasn't my natural strength. But I just looked at these people, and I looked at the way that a lot of my bosses were behaving. Not all, it's important to say, but a lot of my bosses were behaving. And a lot of people who were not necessarily my boss, but, were more senior than me. And I sort of thought, you're not really like me. But actually, most of the time, I thought that meant I wasn't ever going to be able to do their jobs. And then as I did start to get promoted, I thought, do you know what? Maybe I could do their jobs, but I just don't want to do it the way they do it. And by the way, I post-rationalising, I think somehow I thought, so I basically got to a point where I said, right, I wonder if I could actually become the MD of an agency without being a I mean, I remember thinking that right back at BBH when I was an account director.
So you're early 20s at that point?
Well, mid to late 20s, I suppose. So, 26, maybe 27, maybe. And I'm thinking, I don't want to be like that. But the thing is, I was probably thinking it because I knew I couldn't be like that. At that point, I was thinking, maybe subconsciously, this might be your excuse for not getting there. If you try to not be a at least if you don't get there, you'll be able to fall back on the fact that you've not been an absolute in the process. So I definitely thought that very early on. I still then, then I went off to Wunderman. That was interesting because when I resigned from BBH to go to Wunderman, I think they all thought I was mad. I got a 40% pay rise at a point from when I'd gone from having no kids to 2 kids, and everyone thought, why are you going to direct marketing agency having worked at BBH was still the most awarded, respected, renowned agencies making the best work in the world. And the truth is, I went because I needed the money. And I was unashamed that my family was the most important thing at that point. And that's interesting because a lot of advice you get is, no, don't make those kind of decisions. But I always think it's important to look at the whole context within which you're making a decision. And my context was I needed a house, not a flat, and I didn't have enough money. And
what were you on at BBH, and then what did you get at Wunderman?
It's a lot. I mean, this is 25 years ago, probably more, mate. So I was probably on 35 grand at BBH,
and then you stepped up
maybe not quite. Well, you work it out. Got 40% pay rise. So
nice.
So we'll talk
around that
to do that. Probably a bit more then. Well, yeah. Anyway, so look, I got a good step up, and actually thinking about it, probably it was maybe 45% pay rise. So look, I ended up at Wunderman, and actually I only spent 18 months there. I then went to an agency called Archibald Ingalls Streatham because some of the founders there I'd worked with at BBH, and that was my first lesson, which is make as few enemies as possible and always do a good job because you don't know where anything's going to end up. And these people phoned me up and says, right, we're, come back and work with us at the new agency we've set up. So I did that, and then I cycled through a couple of other agencies after AIS and got to a place called Claydon Healy, and that's where this very sort of life changing conversation happened, and I'd been on gardening leave for 3 months before I got there, and so during that time I decided I was going to read lots of books on the industry. I'd never done that before. I wasn't really a big reader. I'd got a deputy managing director job title. I thought I would need to be serious and I'm going to read some books, and so I did, and then I had 3 months off, which was a real opportunity to overthink the out of everything. And I arrived into the first meeting I had. It was actually, I remember it was a week before I was due to formally start. I snuck in for a meeting with a potential new client, and the meeting didn't go well. We didn't get through. It was a chemistry meeting for a pitch. We didn't get through to the pitch stage. I then start the job the next week, not feeling a bit funny because, of course, the first meeting. The meeting hadn't gone well overall, and I was pretty sure I hadn't given myself the best performance, but of course you just hope nobody else noticed and that actually you're just beating yourself up about it. And about 3 weeks in, my boss said to me, a guy called Mike Welsh, my boss Mike said to me, how did you think that meeting went? And I said, which meeting? He said, the chemistry meeting the other week. And I said, well, I thought we weren't very good, and I thought I wasn't very good. I was nervous and I was a bit rough around the edges, hadn't been working for 3 months, and so I think I ballsed it up. And he said, yeah, you're right, you did. But the thing is, I didn't recognise the person in that meeting that I'd met when I interviewed you. You know, when and we'd had a really interesting interview process. We probably spent 3 or 4 hours chatting, and over a couple of meetings. And he said that wasn't who I hired. I hired, and then he rolled through a load of descriptions about me and how I'd been in those conversations. That was a real sharp moment for me, and I still remember it very, very vividly, because nobody had ever spoken to me about the way I did what I did. They'd just described the role almost in a contained way that meant everybody to be good at that role, to do it in the same way as it was written down on a job description. He didn't describe any of the things you did. He just described me and the way that meant I went about stuff. And it's the first time I ever thought someone had hired me because of who I was, rather than because of the agencies I'd been lucky enough to work at, or the brands I'd happened to be near when they happened to do some good work that I might have been partially involved in. And that changed everything for me, because I, for the first time, felt confident that the way I was doing stuff was good. I also realised the way I was doing stuff was different from the way most other people were doing stuff as well.
And that was in regards to just not being this alpha leader, I'm the boss type character. You were, what was your style? What were you doing?
I mean, I think I'm a bit more laid back and a bit more natural in conversation. I'm down to earth. I swear a bit. I stutter a bit. I sometimes pause because I can't think of what the right word is, but I'm really passionate. I've always got a point of view. And so I think I really realised almost in a moment that those things were of value. Whereas I'd spent the rest of my career thinking those were the reasons why I wasn't going to get on.
Interesting.
Well, yeah, I think there's a lesson there for everyone listening, watching around that. Yeah, look at what your skills are, and even speak to other people about what they see in you, because in that you can unlock a lot more perspective on, you know, what people benefit
Massively. And also to leaders. If you are managing somebody, talk to them about the way they're doing stuff, not just about what they're doing. And when you're giving them feedback that's positive, talk about their style, not just the thing they did. I now always ask, in interviews, how would you describe your own personal style? It's amazing how often it throws people, because that you're not encouraged to think about the fact there's a million different ways to get the same job done, but there are, and in the end you can only be any good at it your way. Otherwise you're just pretending to do it the way you think someone else should do it.
Would you say that perspective has led you to see more around the humans that you're hiring or working with, as opposed to their roles? And I mean, the roles are important, but the human is always behind the role, right?
I mean, our product in agencies is our people. I mean, we don't have anything else. You're not making a widget or a car or a product that goes out the other end. The ideas our people have, the strategies our people write, that is what we're selling. That is what clients pay us for. So your people are it. Therefore, the job of leading a team from one people up to, however many thousand people you might end up leading, is about understanding the human behind that, because it's only in understanding them you can get them to do their very best work.
So this approach of being who you are, being yourself, is working for you. DDB, one of the most respected, successful agencies. This is 2010. They select you to be managing partner. How does that come about? What's the story there?
Yeah, that came about because so Clayton Healy was part of Omnicom, and Clayton Healy was a smallish agency, but they were very good to me. They spotted my ambition and the fact that I was good, and they.
How did they know you had this ambition? What were you doing to show them you had it?
I don't. I mean, you'd have to ask them. I think I always say this to people. In the end, actually, the most important thing is that you care about what you do. If you really care about what you do, you will try as hard as you can to do it well, and you will try and learn how to do it better. So I always cared, and again, I think that comes right back to the work ethic thing. I always worried I still worry. I always worried that I was gonna lose my job. I always knew that was a bad thing. I was always worried about whether I'd have enough money. But I also was lucky to I didn't fall in. I was lucky to have carved a career for myself in an industry that I loved. And it's not very cool to say you love advertising in an advertising agency, sadly, but I love this world. I love advertising. I think at its best, it's incredible. And it's such brilliant, amazing fun, and it's rewarding, and it's stimulating. And so I think probably back to your question, people notice that. And by this point, of course, I've had this amazing bit of advice from Mike to say, by the way, it's you we bought, not an account director or business director who'd worked at these agencies on these accounts. I always made sure I was very close to clients. So by which I mean, I don't mean to them individually. I mean, I knew what was going on. I was involved in the work. No matter how senior I have become, I still get involved and know the client's business and work in the agency on projects. So all of that. But they sent me on the Omnicom Senior Management Program, and there I met some people who were at DDB. I'd got this unusual CV where I'd worked mostly in direct marketing agencies, but a bit in advertising agencies, which for a long time cast me as a sort of jack of all trades, master of none, but was starting by 2010 to become a valuable and rare commodity, I suppose. The advertising agency world was still full of people that only ever worked in advertising agencies. They'd gone there as graduates, and they had stayed either in the one agency they were at, or they'd moved about other agencies. And I remember interviewing for 8 agencies and being told I wasn't going to get through to interview because I wasn't currently at an advertising agency. So, but by this point, DDB have woken up like a lot of the big networks and realised direct marketing agencies, digital agencies are starting to steal their breakfast, and so they're looking for people like me. And I've been on the Omnicom Senior Management Program where I've met some people who've become really important in my life. Lucy Jameson at Uncommon, she is now. She was on my year at Omnicom Senior Management Program, and we struck it off straight away. And I was lucky because she, but also 3 or 4 other people, had all either worked with me or knew me, and so that's how I got an interview. I remember being really off because that job had been open for a while. I think that they came to me because they couldn't find the right person. That job had been with the recruitment consultants, some of whom I knew and knew me and would report to try and get me jobs for months, and none of them thought I was right for that job. They'd put other people forward. So I...
Is that because, do you think they had this view that you had before where, you should be this certain type of character and you weren't?
I've no idea why, and frankly, nor do I care now. I'm sort of lucky to be able to say that, but it's an important part of the story, right? Which is I was not considered top candidate fodder for that role. What happened was, because I'd worked with people who happened to be at DDB by then, I got to the interview and I was like, why, so why me? And he said, well, every bloody person I spoke to about the fact we can't find anyone for this role here at DDB kept mentioning your name. And so again, there's a lesson, which is I do believe in the end, you sort of earn, you have to luck plays a part. You have to do your best to make sure that you're in a position to capitalise on the luck. So those two things have to come together, and they have done regularly in my life. So I don't pretend that I've earned all this myself. Some of it has been luck, but you carve out the right to be one of the people that gets thought about when those moments come your way.
Mm-hmm. Something that's come up a lot doing these episodes has been that if you're someone who people enjoy spending time with and enjoy working with, and you're someone people want around, that can go a long, long way.
I was at again at Clayton Healy. I went through this excruciating experience when they decided they were going to invest in me. Did an amazing thing, which was the guy the chief talent officer, that he was working like a day or two a week, but he was amazing, and I think he used to run all of Mars's. He was chief people officer for Mars or something. He was sort of semi-retired. Anyway, he said, right, what we're going to do is I'm going to interview the whole agency, by which he sort of meant half the agency, but they interviewed 30 or 40 people to ask them what their experience of working with me was like, which was excruciating in terms of, I felt nervous and anxious when it was going on. And then we sat down for him to give me the feedback, and he said, right, the first and most important thing is everybody really likes you. And I remember that bit in that one moment becoming totally deflated. And then I said, are you kidding me? If that's your leading statement, I'm screwed.
Are you an agency or brand that would like to work with our production company, Unity and Motion? If so, contact us at unityandmotion.com. We produce commercials and social content for brands such as Chanel, Amazon, Reebok, Harrods, The Ritz, and many more. Now back to the show.
And he said, no, that's the most important thing, because if people don't want to follow you, it doesn't matter how good you are, you won't get anywhere. And he said the thing that's coming through is people want to be around you and enjoy being around you. And if you set a direction, they're predisposed to want to get amongst it with you.
So actually, this links back to the story we had with Stephen Woodford. So he was CEO at the time at DDB. Were you there?
Yeah, before.
He's been on the show. If you haven't listened to the episodes, you can find it, Stephen Woodford. And they buy Adam and Eve, which is this, agency on the up, flying, doing great. And so the two companies merge, and you're made group managing director of Adam and Eve DDB.
Not initially. So there's a story to go with it. I'll tell some of the story. I'd actually resigned from DDB, so I'd been there 18 months.
Oh.
And I'd resigned from DDB.
Why?
But because we'd lost a couple of big accounts, including the one I was leading. But I was offered a job to go and work at the agency that account had gone to, and I actually resigned. And then there was this weird moment where DDB was in this sort of lull. People knew something was going to change, didn't know what. And then the Adam and Eve merger happened. And Stephen Woodford had said to me when I resigned, look, just hang in there. And I said, sure, but I can't hang in there forever. And I've been offered this job, so I'm going to take it. And so I resigned, and I did 2 months of my notice. Then the Adam and Eve merger happened, and then James Murphy called me up the night the board at DDB had been told about the merger.
And James Murphy is
he's the founder of Adam and Eve. He now went on to found New Commercial Arts. So called me up and said, I hear you're leaving and you're one of the people who shouldn't be. Meet me tomorrow morning in the basement of Pret a Manger in Covent Garden, which is Murphy will proudly say is exactly his style. And we chatted, and he said, I want you to stay with us. I said, this, they've offered me this. That's important money for me and my family. We went through it. I'm not going to tell you. We went we went and carried on talking, and it ended up with me telling the agency I was going to go to, who shall remain nameless, but telling them with a week to go before I was due to join, to run one of their biggest accounts, that I wasn't joining.
Oh, was that hard to do?
Yeah, that was one of the most frightening moments of my career, making that phone call. And the
What were you scared of?
It felt really, really counter to my principles. I didn't like I knew I was letting them down. I knew they would be angry. I sort of understood that they had good reason to be angry. My dad gave me some really good advice though when I was really tearing my hair out about the decision. He said, but we've sort of mentioned this already in another way, but he said, you can't expect them to not be angry, but equally, your context has totally changed. When you took that job, the Adam and Eve merger hadn't happened, and now you're sitting, in front of a totally different set of decisions. You've got to now decide whether you want that job or the one you're about to go to. So my context changed massively, and I made a difficult decision to stay or rejoin. So I'd had my leaving due.
Oh wow!
Left the agency, and then I walked back in a week later. So I think I'd taken a week off before I was due to join. So I walked back into an agency called Adam and Eve DDB on day one.
Everyone thought, "Oh no, he's lost his memory."
Yeah.
No.
Imagine how weird that is.
You don't work here
It
anymore.
was so weird. It felt like the oddest thing ever. Yeah. Anyway, so that is, and then I was a managing partner for a couple of years before I was then promoted to group managing director. Yeah.
Okay. So you get up to group managing director, and we're now at the point where, 2016, the step up to CEO.
Yeah.
Which is what we're really interested about is that step up. For anybody listening who is in a director role or head of role or a managing director and wants to make that transition, let's hear from you how it played out. I love asking this question. Did Havas give you a call one day and go, "Hey Zav, fancy being CEO," or did you see it in the local corner shop on a on an advert? How does it happen?
So I was called up by a headhunter,
Okay.
who was putting together a list,
And what was the role they were looking for at this point?
CEO of Havas London.
And you'd never been a CEO before. You'd never been C-suite before.
Yeah. Well, I think the language of C-suite is misguided these days. As the group managing director at Adam and Eve DDB, I was sat as a group of 7 or 8 of us who were really running the agency. So, but yeah, I'd never had a C in my title,
Right.
Except for when I was an account person for many years. But
Or in cards.
yeah, exactly. So no, I'd never been a CEO before. I had, I think it is a different role, and it is more lonely. You learn that quite quickly. It is also not nearly as much of a step up as you think, or as out of your reach as you might think. I think particularly if you've come through the route of being an account management person, in an agency, you will have had a lot of experience of leading teams, and this is just the next step in that in some ways. I think the biggest difference for me is you're suddenly standing there, and you're, even within a network, I'm blessed because Havas really gives, and has given me an enormous amount of autonomy to lead the company the way I want to. And, that's, again, I'm not sure it's unique to Havas, but that has been a real different experience for me than working for lots of other networks. So I was given this autonomy, and so you stand there and you realise, suddenly you go, oh my God, so I've got these tens of millions of pounds of revenue sort of coming through the organisation. And there was it dawned on me that you could sort of choose to just, allocated to profit, and then that goes back to global HQ, and in the end back to shareholders. Or you can look at it through another lens, which is, well, we'll do all that, but actually, while it's travelling through our world, what impact can we have while we're at it? Sort of in the same way as when you're making an ad, right? You can say, well, I'm just going to make an ad that delivers the message that we've been asked to. Or I can try and make it the most impactful ad we've created, and an ad that is remembered and has an impact on society and culture, not just an ad that does the bare minimum of what the brief required. And so if you've got that about you, and you've spent your life trying to do that for your clients and with the advertising you're creating with them, actually it wasn't a massive leap to then go, oh, hold on a second, we could do something interesting here.
So we'll talk about
we did.
We'll talk about everything you did, all the interesting things you did. But going back to the story, the recruiter gives you a call or drops you an email and says, what?
Yeah, I remember I was on the way to a meeting over in Wolfsburg, a global Volkswagen meeting, and this will have been about 2 months after the whole Volkswagen scandal happened.
Emissions.
And we had been right at the heart of writing a new ad every day to hit the press to make sure that we managed that situation. And so I was at Heathrow, and I got a phone call from a headhunter that I'd sort of known on and off, saying, "How about Havas?" And
what was your first reaction?
I laughed. I remember laughing. And Chris Hurst, who was the European CEO at that point, sort of been in the role about 6 or 9 months or something. So I'd worked with him a long time ago at BBH. But there's a good lesson here, which is he rightly, even though the other thing I said is he's got my bloody mobile number. He could have just phoned me. But I think it's really important to go through a proper recruitment process rather than just think about the people you know. So I was on a list alongside people.
How long was the list? Do you know?
I've no idea how long the list was, but I suppose my point is it's important to properly construct it and probably partner with somebody to construct it, whether they be internally or externally, to make sure that you are learning from other people's perspective on the industry rather than just relying on your own.
So you laughed and then obviously said, yeah, okay.
I said, I'll meet for a coffee, just, because it's Chris, and Chris and I had, talked about working with each other at different points, but sort of prior to that.
At this point, have you got big ambitions with Adam and Eve DDB though?
Yes, I probably feel that at Adam and Eve DDB, so I was the only person really at the heart of that leadership team that wasn't a founder, and we were still in earnout, and I didn't have any money in that earnout, which is fine, so I think the best way to describe it was I was ambitious to lead a company, and I made a judgment that Havas, but once I got talking and Chris and others made extremely good and persuasive arguments for why this would be a good move for me, which all turned out to be absolutely correct. I made a judgment that this was the moment. And it's interesting, isn't it? Because I'd had lots of other calls where I'd sort of said no, and in that moment, you have to make a decision, and it's not without risk. I mean, at Adam and Eve, we had just won back-to-back Campaign Agency of the Year, Cannes Agency of the Year, and we were making, I was making the best work of my career. We were making the best work in the world. And then you have to make a decision like that. So you have to step into the unknown. There's no data points that can help you. You've just got to follow your gut, and you've got to decide whether you think it's going to work out for you. Well, you don't know. You don't know.
So you do follow your gut. You get through the interview process, and what happens? They say, "Yeah, we want you."
Yeah.
Pretty much.
Yeah, I mean, it was a good, rigorous process. I had to meet quite a few people. Most importantly, I had to meet several people that I'd either be, working alongside or would be working for me, which again is super useful. But so for I had to meet the ECDs who were going to report to me, but it was such a key partnership. As in the executive creative directors. So I had to meet the chief strategy officer, who would be my partner, and that was good for two reasons. One, I think it's good to be judged by the people that are going to work for you, not just the people that you're going to work for. And I think it's good. I think it's essential that you feel that there's going to be chemistry between you and the people you're going to be in a team with.
Yeah.
It all lives or dies on that connection.
And for someone who, is looking to be in that role in the future, what would you say the things that they could brush up on to be ready for that kind of position?
To be ready for the position, I mean, so I think I think this is where I think what you're doing is great, because telling the whole story is the answer to that question. I don't think there's a moment where you sit as the group managing director of a company and think, whoa, what am I going to brush up on to be able to have this conversation? But again, back to some of the things we've already talked about. You've got to go in as yourself, partly because if that's not good enough, then it's not going to be good for you, let alone them. I think what you have got to, you've got to do what you always do for an interview, right? Which you've got to research inside out the company that you're thinking about working for. You've got to have a point of view on the work they're doing. You've got to have a point of view on where you think you could take them. You've got to have a point of view on why you think you might be an interesting person to talk to about the role and why you think you might be able to do it. So it's about selling yourself, but it's also about reflecting on all those things so that you can make a decision about whether you're ready for it and whether you think you're going to be able to do it well. I think the minute you feel like you're selling yourself, but you don't believe what you're selling, then I think that's a tricky place to be in. Mm-hmm. So you have to sort of prepare yourself, and in preparing yourself, ask yourself some questions about whether you think you can do this.
And so you start your role, and it's first time being CEO. Probably don't want to mess it up. Yeah. Want to do a good job. If you mess it up, if you get fired in the first few months, who's going to hire you as a CEO again? All this pressure going on. A lot of people to manage, all lots of new things. All the while, you've got this situation at home going on. Can you share what was happening with your family at that time?
Well, let's parallel run two things. First thing is, so you find yourself in this role, and yet again, foolishly, I decided to read a book while I was on gardening leave. How to be a CEO, and
was it literally called that? CEO for Dummies.
It's an FT business book. I can't remember what it was. Literally something like CEO, and I'll give you a review of it, it was kind of interesting because it helps you realise that most of what it said probably wasn't right for me, but maybe I wouldn't have got there unless I'd read it and had something to contrast it with. But one of the things it says, don't just observe and learn and don't make assumptions too quickly, and therefore don't make any big decisions for 100 days. And within 30 days, I knew several of the things that I wanted to do. So that's going on, and then also within 30 days, my daughter. So I have 3 daughters by this point, who are so in 2016 they're all in their teens. My youngest is about to be 13. My middle daughter was diagnosed as autistic when she was 8 or 9, and she was already starting to become quite mentally unwell when I when I'd already resigned from Adam and Eve and was working my notice. But she got much worse during that period, and 4 weeks into joining Havas, she was admitted to a psychiatric unit as an inpatient.
And what does that mean for people who don't know?
Well, that means she goes to live in a hospital mainly for her own safety, but also so that they can begin the process of understanding what's wrong with her and how to get her well again. So,
and how are you feeling at this time?
Yeah, well, again, it's all just happening to you, right? So I think that it's easy to reflect now, but at the time, a lot of stuff's happening to you, and you don't know how to process it. So, one of the things that's happening is you're worried about your daughter's life, and so you're not thinking about work as a first priority. But then when you do think about work, the first thing I started thinking was, oh my God, why have I left Adam and Eve? They would have looked after me. I'd been there 6-7 years. Why am I taking on a big new job now? I'm not going to be able to do it. There were big moments. I would have to leave the office at short notice. I remember leaving a pitch during the Q&A at the end before the meeting had finished.
You're the new CEO.
Yeah, I'm probably 6-8 weeks in by maybe, who knows, 2 or 3 months in by the point that I'm leaving a pitch during the Q&A. My PA sort of knocks on the window and kind of makes it clear that even though it's a pitch, I need to leave. But then you're also getting phone calls in the morning from the hospital telling you things that you don't, that are tough to handle. So I remember, I remember being physically sick in the gutter on my way to the office, but there's nothing you can do.
Why were you sick?
Because of some news I'd just received from the hospital, and then.
So you're sick because
because you're worried and because you're just being told shocking things, and then I think, well. And you're not wanted at the hospital. It's not useful for you to be there. You just know these things are happening. And so the first thing I had to do is call my wife to tell her the thing that I'd been told. And then the second thing I had to do was work out what I was going to do next. And so I walked into work. And it's funny, but you sort of this is a few months on by this time. So we just got into the new building in King's Cross where we are now, and that we've got some big doors at the front of the building, and I don't do it anymore. But I recall for a couple of years arriving at those doors, then physically doing this, and then walking through the doors to try and deal with and not separate what was going on at home versus at work. So.
And what's going on there when you're taking in that breath? What's behind it?
I think you're just trying to summon the ability to have these two things going on at the same time and to focus on one thing, as well as knowing the other thing's going to need some focus at some point. But you have to be able to switch between the two. And that was it. You have to be able to switch between. I mean, you in the end you coexist. And I made a decision really quickly to. I'd never been very vocal about what was going on in my personal life at work, but I made a decision that I was going to be completely open with everybody about everything from that point on. So I remember sending a note to my tight team and my boss saying, "What this is what's going on," and then I was. I remained open about it, so I let them know what was going on. So that
was it. Nervous pressing send on that email to everybody, letting them know. Did you have doubts?
Not as nerve-wracking as it would have been if the one thing hadn't happened before it, which is having been given an amazing private health plan by Havas when I walked in, I quickly found out that if you have a requirement to be in hospital, with a psychiatric diagnosis, then your health insurance only pays for a month in hospital. So that's fine if you only need to be, but what if you're not better in a month? So I had to go. I went to the woman who ran the HR department and said, "Look, is there another level of this health plan I could get onto so that I can have longer? And also, is there a, I don't mind paying a bit, but how could we make all of that work?" And she came back to me and said, "This is like 3 or 4 weeks into my new job." She came back and said, "There is no higher level. That's not how it works. But we've deposited this much money with the health insurance provider to make sure that you can have 3 months."
Wow.
So in the grand scheme of things, that wasn't an impossible amount of money. Like, that might have been the amount of money I could have expected for a bonus 1 year, but it was a life-changing gesture because I immediately realised that my boss had my back, and that, no questions asked, they wanted to support me. But it was frightening, pressing send. It was also, I would leave, the office, for example, when I had to leave towards the end of a pitch, or, I would just have to suddenly say to people, I'd get a phone call and I'd have to say, I've got to go, and I've got to go now. So I'm really sorry. So that meeting I was going to do, can you do that one? Move that one to tomorrow, and I'll see you all later. And I would leave, and, you'd sit there and go, well, I'm setting the wrong example. How can I expect everybody to really bust their asses when I'm not? Why did I leave this job? I'm going to let everybody down. People have really backed me. They've chosen me over other people. If I screw this up, it's going to look like I can't do a CEO job, so I won't get another one. All of this stuff goes through whizzes through your mind.
How did you kind of quiet those voices? What did you do to kind of combat that?
Well, there's a few things I did myself, and then the most important things were what other people said to me. So what actually started happening was, I hopefully won't get too emotional when I say this, but I used to get emotional when I told this story originally a few years ago. People would start coming up to me either down the pub or while I was making a coffee, and they'd quietly say to me, "Hey, I heard you left that pitch. I heard your daughter is in hospital, and I just wanted to say how impressed I am that you are putting them first. Like to have somebody in the CEO role behaving in that way sets a totally different example than I've ever seen." And this happened like all the time. So that told me two things. One, people we know what we're like, right? We don't always say things like that to our bosses. So people felt sufficiently compelled to say it to me, and I'm talking, scores of people over those couple of years would say it to me. But they'd come and say it in a quiet moment because they didn't know how public I wanted to be, and they didn't know whether they were supposed to know. So I just felt this overwhelming sense of support, and that people, and also I realised that, what did I realise? I realised there's another way of leading. I always used to find it frustrating when people, when there was a sort of presenteeism culture, when your bosses would look around and say, well, so-and-so on your team's not here at 7:00. So are they really committed? Particularly if I knew they were committed, it would make me annoyed. But actually, I found myself ending up leading in the same way. And consciously and subconsciously thinking, well, if you're not around, how committed are you? And also, if you're putting your family first, it's not necessarily a popular decision at this point in 2016. It's funny, it doesn't sound that long ago, but a lot has changed since then, and it's not a popular decision to say I can't be in a pitch meeting because something's going on at home. And I think you've always got to make decisions about that. And by the way, I have at times, decided that I need to be in the pitch, not prioritise the personal thing, but each time you have to make a decision, right? So, I realised that I could get the work done. I just had to find a different way of getting it done in the hours when I was able to do it. By the way, I probably worked just as many Saturdays or Sundays as I had done before, but I did it on my terms, and I knew that the team around me supported me to do that. And the other thing that I decided is the worst thing that could happen at this point for my family is that I lose my job or my mind. So I decided to look after myself. So I actually, I started exercising more probably than I had done. I started to eat better, and I made sure that I was in as good shape as I could be.
What was it that really made you make that decision? How are you currently living, and how are you currently feeling mentally?
Well, it's weird. None of them were. They weren't conscious decisions. I just felt I just felt a massive weight that, particularly at the point at which we're still paying, we're still thinking we're going to have to pay for private healthcare. What actually happened is my daughter went into the NHS, and actually that's when everything started to a slow journey, a very slow and very long journey to a good place. But I have felt a huge weight that it was important that I had a job for my family, and therefore it was important I did a good job, because it's doing a good job that keeps you in a job.
I think you mentioned that you saw a photo of yourself at that time. What did you think when you saw that photo?
I looked terrible. I think I looked. Is that what I said? I looked terrible. Yeah. I mean, I looked. I mean, you're sort of operating on the edge a bit. I mean, probably nobody else noticed, because it just, I didn't, probably if I showed it to you, just thought it was just slightly less, slightly uglier version of me than me. But I look at it and think, well, you're not well, mate. So I think I realised that my people had my back, and then I looked after myself. And then I should also huge shout out to my family, all of them, my wife and all three of my daughters, but my two daughters who weren't in hospital went through a lot, and we all as a unit have somehow found a way through it. And it would be impossible to say any of those were really deliberate, smart decisions. You just making do, and you're making decisions in the moment. All you can do is your best, right? So I had all that going on.
So you get yourself into running, you start eating better, getting into a better state, and you've since progressed in Havas since that time. What's your career journey been there?
Yeah, so again, talk about, so nothing ever happens at the right time in a career, in life, right? But in a career, so it happens when it happens, and so we did, we worked hard, and we started winning pitches in Havas London, and by 18 months in, we become a runner-up in the campaign agency the year. We took Havas from nowhere to some big pitch wins. We were like top. I think we came second in the campaign new biz list, and we were a runner-up for agency of the year. And because of course I've got my jack of all trades slash by this point it's becoming multilingual across key disciplines. Because I've got that to my story. The CEO of Havas Helio, which is our direct marketing or customer engagement CX agency, depending on which year you use, the words change. But the CEO left, and Chris Hurst asked me to take on the leadership of that agency as well. Frankly, I think we all knew it was probably a bit too soon. You know, if everything had remained the same, I definitely wouldn't have taken that role on. That probably happened. You know, that happened sort of just under 2 years into me being at Havas, probably, and I took the role. But that definitely happened sooner than probably was natural. Probably if we had sat there, my boss and I had sat there and said, right, at what point will that make sense? It would have been much further down the road time-wise, but life doesn't happen like that. People don't resign when you want them to, and things move on. So I got an opportunity when I wasn't expecting it to take on an additional role across another agency in Havas. And that was exciting. It was exciting because actually going in and doing the role in Havas London was probably the first time I'd not worked in customer engagement or direct marketing or for 15 years. I'd always had at least part of my life in that. Even when I was at DDB, we were running all of the direct marketing and the digital comm as well as the brand advertising on the clients I was working at in those first years at DDB. So I suddenly was CEO of 2 agencies. And
much more responsibility you're taking on.
That can't be an easy thing.
No, it was crazy. I mean, it's unhinged, right? But this
you
is
managing
right?
How many people then? How many people after?
So I suppose I went from managing about somewhere between 200 and 250 people to managing another 150 people. So yeah. But life is interesting because that whole point about things not happening when it's convenient for you, sometimes they happen much more slowly. So actually, I was behind a lot of my peers. By the time I was a managing partner at DDB, I'd taken a real sideways. I'd made a decision to move. I was the deputy MD of an agency, and I decided to sort of step at best sideways and really slightly half a step down, become a managing partner amongst several managing partners. So your career sometimes moves slower than you want it to, and sometimes faster, depending on what's going on in the world around you.
Yeah.
None of which is within your control. All you can do is make sure you're doing a good job, and that people that suddenly got decisions they didn't think they would have to make. So I took that on, and sort of never looked back. Havas Helio, I'm so proud of. We've done a brilliant job. What actually happened is we won. That market's slightly differently shaped from the advertising market. There tends to be 1 or 2 big pitches a year in that market, and we won the big pitch every year for 4 years. We won Starbucks, Lloyds Banking Group, Compare the Market, Volkswagen Group and all its brands. But that required I had to do exactly what I'd done in Havas London, which is go in and completely restructure the agency, bring new people in, unfortunately exit some people, and configure it in a way that I thought was going to, help us bring the agency forward and really succeed.
And so we're going to get on to a minute about all of the interesting things you've done while at Havas. But finishing off your sort of career journey, July 2022, Havas goes through a big change, and they merge 2 companies together, and there's a big shift in roles, and your role change. What happened there?
So they haven't merged 2 entities. Really important to say. So what happened was a decision was made to pull the CEO of the health group across the creative network as well. So those networks rightly remain separate. Now, of course, what's actually happening is we're learning more from each other, and there are some shared capabilities that we're building, but they importantly do quite different things. They share some things, but they actually do very different things in many ways. So they exist as 2 separate networks, and my view is that will remain. But I got a new boss. So I got a new boss, and the boss that brought me into Havas left, and and that was really destabilizing. But I got given more agencies as a result. Well, because any change, humans. It's funny because change is seen to be a very coveted capability or state of being in business. But the truth of it is human beings are not programmed to be good at change. They're programmed to identify routines that work for them and stick to them. And it's only when it's forced on you that the outside world forces things on humans that they really change, and they change because they have to, not because they want to. So
is this the point you become UK Group CEO?
So this is the point at which I become Group CEO of Havas Creative. Yeah. So
what's the difference? How do you?
So I've taken on some additional agencies. Basically, I mean that's the best way to describe it.
And how many? So you're now managing 7.
Depending on how you count them, 6 or 7 agencies. Yeah.
Wow.
And that's 700 other people.
Yeah.
So the remit's changed now. What has changed within your role from when you were just at Havas as one CEO to now being where you are? What kind of?
Yeah, so it's interesting because I was set out by trying to thinking. So when I took on Havas Helia, I changed some stuff underneath me, but fundamentally, I still was able to operate in the way I was doing before. I probably did a bit more work, but Havas London was already on a good journey. I stayed very involved in Havas London and just waded into Havas Helia as well. When I took on the additional agencies a year ago, I tried to do the same, and that clearly wasn't going to work. I learnt, and so what I've really learnt is that I do now. I've had to take a step back and think about the things that I need to achieve in my new role, which are actually different from the things I needed to achieve in my old role. Some of them, but also how can I keep an oar in so I feel connected with clients, and I still have the ability to influence in a positive way the quality of the work we do as an agency for our clients. But I have to do that differently than I did before, and I have to be more choiceful. I also have to. I've had to put people in. So, for example, I've appointed somebody to be the CEO of Havas London, so that they can lead, that well without me. I'm still involved in Havas London, but it's not my job to lead that agency on its own primarily.
So how do you do that? You managing 6 or 7 agencies. Do you pop to one every 3 days and go, "How are you getting on, guys?" How do you do what you do?
A lot of talking. So I think.
And is there a structure to it?
Probably, yeah. I mean, there's definitely structure to it. There's probably not as much structure as other people might put in place. So that's just probably more down to my style, and maybe I need to put a bit more structure than I've got. But the way that I think I do it, but you probably have to ask the people that work for me, is I sort of either sail very sort of high up, or I drop really deep in. So I'm having regular weekly conversations with all of those agencies, and not just the people that are running them. I'll be talking to people that are running the key accounts, some of the other leadership team. So I've got a whole set of meetings that are set up as regular meetings, and by the way, they probably constitute nigh on, let's say 40% of my time, sort of regular chances to talk and listen to people.
But do you have an agenda for those, or they flow naturally?
No, I mean specifically not an agenda. They're a chance for people to update me, and or if I've got a particular area of focus for that agency or for the group as a whole that I want to pick their brains on or communicate or redirect or whatever it is, I'll use them for that. And of course, as a result, I think sometimes the problem with having too fixed an agenda is that the agenda leads the way rather than the things that matter.
And you do something interesting with your diary. The morning.
Nice. Yeah, oh yes, yeah.
What do you do?
No formally pre-arranged meetings for 10 a.m.
And what's the thinking behind that? So your every day, your calendar is clear.
Yeah, so
till 10 o'clock.
I'm in the office by about 8:30, 8:45, even though I live in bloody Oxford.
What time do you leave?
I leave the house about 7 or 7 or half 7. I mean, I also, by the way, try not to sort of. It's always that time I leave, always that train I get. Because the other thing is you've got to manage your energy levels. Some days you can take on the world. So I'm awake by 6, I'm left the house by 6:45, and sometimes even earlier. Other days you're dragging yourself out of bed. It's not going to benefit anybody. You ride your energy levels to work out how you're going to be of best use to people. Because if you don't, you drain yourself even more. So I'm basically saying I've got a minimum of an hour every day at the start of the day when I'm around and available for conversation. Because as we all know, you write a list at the start of the day, and you'll have spent the whole day busy, but at the end of the day, you might well have not touched quite a few things that you thought you were going to do because other stuff happened along the way. So, and I think it's really important to realise that a big chunk of what we do, particularly in a service-driven industry, is stuff that you won't know about at the start of the day, and that's all right. And not to see that as something that's getting in the way, but something that is the nature of what we do. Being responsive and being available is super, super important. So of course, what happens is people know they can catch me. I position myself in the cafe at work. People will text me the night before on the way in, and if they haven't done that, I will know the people I need to talk to, and if neither of those things are necessary, I can spend an hour getting some done.
And you don't sit yourself in a corner office somewhere, in your own space, with your big desk and
the crystal
police
tower.
come in. How do you do things?
But nobody does that now, right? Well, maybe a few people do, but I sit on a pod with. So I sit on a pod with my team, but just on the floor with everybody else. So on the pod next to us, some of the account teams, the planners.
Why'd you do that?
I think so much in an agency, in any organisation, but I can only talk about agencies really. So much in an agency happens by osmosis. I think you feel things, you hear things, and I always talk about my antennae flickering. My antennae are always flickering for something. As much as the overt communication, I'm looking for body language. You can hear when there's a buzz around the place. You can hear when people are nervous. You can hear when there's no energy. You can see whether people are deflated without anyone saying anything. So I think being in and around it is so important. You can also, through your own behaviours, communicate really positively. You can let people know you've got good energy going on yourself. So look, I'm a big fan of being out and amongst it. I've got a room that I can go to if I need to have confidential conversations or a meeting or whatever, but I'm mostly not in it. In fact, I also have a terrible thing where other people, if there isn't a room, will want to use it, and then I feel bad about kicking them out. So you're more likely to find me either at my desk or in a cafe if I'm not in a meeting, and I also think that fosters much better conversations. If someone's got to step into your office, the power dynamics is totally screwed. You can't have a level conversation with somebody who's going to be honest with you and relax with you if they are sat the other side of your desk in your office, and your power being communicated subconsciously just by where you're having the conversation. So I'm sat with a lukewarm cup of tea or coffee in the cafe, picking up conversations.
Numbers. As CEO, what are the metrics you're looking at on a regular basis? What, for someone listening who's may become a CEO one day or is now, what can they learn from that?
So, so I've got sort of 4 metrics I look out for constantly and that we're actively measuring. obviously there's a set of commercial measures, but so just let's go quickly through them and talk a bit more about that. So you've got commercial measures, you've got product, what we're actually making for our clients, the quality of the work we're making. You've got the client satisfaction, are the clients happy with not only the work we're making, but the way we're doing it? Do they like working with us? And do they think we're doing a good job? And then you've got, what do our people think? Are our people happy? What do they think of the agency? What do they think of the leadership team? How do they feel about each other? Do they like coming to work? So how do clients feel? How do our people feel? How good is the work? Is that delivering the money? And it sort of works, probably works. You've probably got one out of order there. Actually, it's about how are your people feeling? How are your clients feeling?
Mm.
Both those things are good. You're going to make good work. And if all three of those things are good, you're going to make money.
Mm.
And what tools are you using to read this data?
We've got very regular financial forecasting. We do a dip of client satisfaction. So one question, like a net promoter score.
The one Stephen Woodford did at DDB.
It's a lot of agencies use it across the industry, although not all. But it's it's basically on a score of 1 to 10. How likely are you to, how happy are you and how likely are you to recommend us to your colleagues and friends?
The story behind that is Stephen Woodford asked an organisation to create this thing from that question.
And I don't know whether that's true or not, so I'll take Stephen's word for it.
Got to bring him on.
Yeah.
Find out. Okay, that's how you do it.
Yeah.
And
So that's how you measure the client satisfaction. Obviously, that's not the only way. That is a useful barometer because it's singular. And really what it does is tell you how clients are feeling. And it's at a moment in time as well. So lots of people are working on, on particular clients. Obviously, if they get a 10, they're delighted. But if you get a bad score, there's always lots of reasons why, but it sort of doesn't matter because that's the way the client feels. That's the way the client feels. So it's super useful. We do a star survey a couple of times a year, and that's quite broad ranging. That looks at everything from how engaged they are in what we're trying to achieve as a business, to how much they believe in the leadership, to how welcome they feel and how much they feel like they belong. So we do that. We have months. The agencies are looking at their numbers weekly from a commercial point of view, but I have monthly finance reporting meetings where we look at exactly how everybody's doing. And
interestingly on that, am I right in saying that you have just one P&L that you look at rather than across?
Yes, I mean, it's funny, I've been writing a document today, so yes, but of course each leader, everyone, the reality of it is, even when you're running an account, you've got a mini P&L from the minute you're looking after more than two people or more, and a client, because you're reporting on how much revenue you got, how many people you used to get that revenue, did the client pay for all those people, all that kind of stuff. So yes, it all adds up to one P&L, and that enables me and my teams to move people to where the need is really quickly and to stand up the right solution for clients. But everybody's got their own mini P&L so that they know and can have some control over things as well.
So just to understand, is that one P&L for Havas Creative, and is that all the sort of
well, of course, in the
agencies?
In the end, of course, Havas reports one number, and it's in its numbers, and underneath that, some guidelines for how that money got made. So but across the creative group in the UK, it's one P&L. That P&L is all when it's going well, it's everybody else's achievement, and when it's going wrong, it's all my fault. So
That's how it goes.
always the way.
Yeah.
Always the way. And then just creative work, right? We didn't talk. So the most important thing and the driver of client relationships and people being happy is the work we're making good, and has it been an enjoyable process getting there, right? But actually, I believe the work's always better if it's been an enjoyable process, and that's not to say there's not friction along the way, but I keep a real close eye on the work that's going out the door, and if it's good, and if there's an opportunity to really, really make an outstanding piece of work, I will judge whether it's going to benefit from me being around or my senior team being really deeply involved in it or not. And if the team got it without me, then I won't bother them. If I think I've got something I can add, then I'm not afraid to sort of plonk myself in a creative review and make a nuisance of myself. Hopefully that's not how it feels, but yeah. So we measure creative, yes, by awards, but I also just make my own judgment about whether I think the quality of our work is high enough, and I feel able to do that because I'm lucky to have spent my career in and around the best work.
What I think I love about you is that you're really keen to implement changes to change not only Havas but the industry, and that some of that comes from your own life experience.
Yes. Moving on from numbers over to people, you see here that you've updated the parental leave policy to extend to 6 months paid leave for both mothers and fathers.
Yeah.
That's very groundbreaking. And for mothers, it was previously 6 weeks at full pay and 20 at 50%. And for fathers, it was 4 weeks at full salary.
Yeah, and it was only 2 weeks when I got there, so we changed it to 4 weeks, pretty early on, and then we've gone again. So
it was 2 weeks when you got there, which is the same as it was when you were in your early 20s.
Yeah.
Why did you change it?
Because it's a talent game, right? So we exist in an industry which is oversaturated. Either there's too many agencies and not enough good people. And so I wouldn't even say part of my job. All of my job is to make sure we've got more of the best talent working for us, so that we can do more of the best work for our clients than our competitors. And the only way to have more of the best talent is to create an environment where more of the best talent wants to work for you, not anybody else. Now, what does more of the best talent look like? It doesn't look like a bunch of blokes that all had 2 weeks paternity leave off and happened to get a leg up because they didn't have to take a year out to have a kid, right? What it looks like is an environment where if you're brilliant at your job, whatever happens in your life, we want you around. If you can contribute and you can help us be better, tell us what we need to do to make this a place you want to be. And so it sort of starts there. And as we all know, an agency full of white middle-class blokes, it doesn't deliver the best work in the industry, and isn't an environment, thankfully, that most people want to hang out in anymore. So creating a diverse environment, it both gives you a better chance of having the best people around in the first place, but definitely gives you the best chance of keeping them around. And when it comes to parental leave, it is critical that that men and women get the same amount of time off, from my perspective, because these are important moments in people's lives, and sadly it's a competitive advantage at the moment. So on one side of things, it's a reason why people will want to come and work for us and stay working for us. But you know what? It's really interesting having blokes who are able to take 6 months off to be with their new children. And we're in year one of this, right? But what's starting to happen is and I've encouraged our senior men to take the time, as I encourage our senior women to, but is men are freaking out oh God, I'm going to have 6. Right. So they want to have it, and then they have a meltdown because what does it mean? What's going to happen to my career? So I'm delighted because what's happening is the men who have suddenly got this ability to spend some time with their young families are choosing to do it, and then are going through exactly the same experience that all women who have chosen to have children have gone through for time immemorial. And that is already interesting on a number of levels. One, just in itself, and two, because what happens, the men who are going off on paternity leave for that long definitely learn for the first time what it actually feels like to go off on maternity leave, and two, all the people around them start to see how that feels as well, because it's suddenly conversation. And what's interesting is because it's new for these men, they are much more vocal about it. I think women have accepted it's their lot and get on with it. And what I've observed is what's really happening is women have had to accept this because they have no option, and men have never had to think about it at any depth that you think you have, but you haven't. So that's interesting. But you know what's amazing? People are joining us way out from having being in a position to have families because of this policy. People are staying with us because of this policy. It absolutely creates an environment where you can bring an unfair share of the industry's talent into the agency. And on top of that, I just have a really passionate belief that you can never have equality while it's financially beneficial for women to take more time or to look after their kids than men. Now, I have nothing against a family that decides that mum wants to stay at home rather than dad, but the really important thing is that it's a choice you make for reasons other than financial necessity. Whilst it's financially necessary for a woman to choose to do something she doesn't want to because her partner will bring more money in the process, that's why we can't move forward. So I hope, in having given ourselves a competitive advantage, that over the coming years it ceases to be a competitive advantage, and that all businesses in our category will start to work in the same way, because that way the entire industry will have more talent in it than it's got now, and that way we will create cultures which are informed much more greatly by the outstanding women we've got in our industry and keeping them in our industry, rather than an industry that fails to keep those people around. Sorry, that's me wanging on.
No, I love that.
But,
love it.
So sort of there's a personal bit to it, but it makes extraordinarily sound business sense.
And with that as well, amid this cost of living crisis, you're investing a large amount of money into helping your staff navigate financial hardships. Tell us a bit about that.
Well, again, it's about looking after your people and creating an environment where talent stays. And we're in extraordinary times. And the truth of it is, we'd already started to see some people leaving, not even to go to other agencies, to leave London. We start to see people who left the agency to stay in London but go into other industries that were able to look after people better. So that mostly didn't happen in our agency. It mostly happened elsewhere, but you could see the signals. So we very quickly decided we wanted to do a whole number of things, and I haven't got my list of stuff we've done, but we looked at some things that cost less money but were going to be of high value to people, and then we've done some things which probably cost a bit more money, and then because we couldn't afford to do them for everybody, we targeted we took all the money we could afford to spend on giving. So we decided to give people a cost of living uplift in their salary for 6 months, and we knew that we couldn't give a meaningful amount of money if we gave that to everybody. So we focused it at people who earn 30k or less, and made sure all the money went there.
And we're talking, I think you spent 300 to 400,000
£400,000
on this.
Yeah. I mean, which across a number of agencies, I think it's really important to say we spent an affordable amount of money, which still enables us to hit our targets and make money. But we know that if you haven't got the best people, your business will fail. So we made a proactive decision before people were forced to leave, to help them stay. So the way I look at it.
Yeah, I think it's great how you do things that aren't necessarily the norm, and you do things that cost a lot of money. But what's your advice for, as a CEO or another business leader that's thinking maybe not that way, where 300, 400k, I could spend that on clients so we can get more work?
Yeah. You can have all the clients and all the work in the world you want, but if you haven't got any good people to work on it, you'll lose the clients pretty bloody quickly. That's my advice. So that's the first bit of advice. The other bit of advice, I think it's really important to say, because I always I think people sometimes think you have to make a choice between making money and running a good, profitable business and looking after your people, and that's sort of subconsciously at the heart of this conversation. But it's not true. You can run a thriving business that makes a lot of money and still look after your people. You might have to spend a bit more money, but you probably make more money out the other side in the long term. So I think that's the most important point, because it's unusual. I just looked at my watch because we've been talking for a while now, and it's probably rarely go this long having this kind of conversation without mentioning the fact that we're a B Corp and how passionately I feel about B Corps generally. But if you don't know what a B Corp is, it's a different type of legal structure for a company, which means that you have to change your legal articles at Companies House to put, and I'm paraphrasing, people, profit and planet on an equal footing, which means that I and the board of Havas London are held accountable for doing that. So when we sit down and make decisions as a team, we're making decisions about balancing people, profit and planet, but we're not making decisions about prioritising people and planet over profit. We're making decisions to make sure they all act in equilibrium, and that's hard, but that's the way to do it, I think. And by the way, there are some people that disagree with me, right? There are some people at the further up the sort of the spectrum who would say no, people and planet are more important than profit. I think I'm aware and I appreciate and I'm excited and I like making money. I think that there are different ways you can do that, and that that's my chosen strategy. But back to the point. Yeah, we've spent money, but we've spent it wisely, and we spent it to look after our people, because they're the people that make us the money.
Yeah, and with that, would you say that it's important for other leaders such as yourself to come together and unify around some of these issues that the industry's facing?
Well, yeah, I mean, yes, I would. And when we first became a B Corp, I very publicly said it's the one competitive advantage I don't want to have. And I can definitely tell you it's been a competitive advantage, and I can definitely tell you that a ton of small agencies have become B Corps, and I probably entirely off their own bat. But I hope that in some small way, the fact that Havas London certified, helped or inspired some of them. But very, very few / no big agencies have really done it. In fact, Wyden and Kennedy have just done it. So I should take that back. They're the first agency of any similar scale to us that have done it. And so yeah, from an industry perspective, again, this is one of the things you realise, right? You're in a position of responsibility and the ability to influence people. Havas isn't, Havas, London, and then the agencies I look after. We're not talking about, a company that can change the world on its own, but you do have influence, and I've had to uncomfortably appreciate that. So you can choose not to use that, or you can choose to use it, right? So I know that if we behave in a certain way, then other people will notice, and that's a good thing. So one of the things that Havas London have done is we've signed the Better Business Act. I've signed up to the Better Business Act. Now, what that is trying to do is change law in the UK so that all companies are held accountable for the things that you're accountable for if you're a B Corp. So if that campaign succeeds, which will take a few years, then there won't be a board in the UK that is not expected and legally required to balance people, profit and planet. So I think that it is possible to help create change outside of your organisation by doing things the way you think they should be done within your organisation. And I'm proud to spend, some of my weekends and evenings forwarding some of those conversations. Yeah.
Excellent.
And you, in April, just recently became chair of the Talent Leadership Group for the IPA.
Yeah.
One of the biggest, most recognised trade bodies.
Yeah.
What do you hope to achieve in that role? Why did you take it?
Well, I nearly didn't take it. So I said no originally. I'm sure Layla and the guys at the IPA won't mind me saying that.
Why did you say no?
Because I thought, who am I to be able to be the voice for the next generation of talent in this industry, and to try and make this a more diverse and inclusive industry to be in. I know my story, and there's only a certain amount of personal experience I can draw on. So that's the first thing I thought. I think what I have, what people have impressed upon me is that actually, I feel uncomfortable here. You can tell I'll start stuttering more because I don't like talking myself up too. I'm happier talking about stuff I've done rather than just sort of talking about how good it was. But I think what I realise is that some of the things that we've done and that I've done, and some of the views I hold, and probably views that I'm prepared to stand up behind as well. I think that's the other thing. I hope there's lots of people that have got the views I have, but they're probably a bit less comfortable about saying them out loud. And that's not something I'm afraid to do. I really value the principles I've got, and so then I said yes after a few people had talked me round, and and I actually chaired my first meeting last week. So look, what do I want to achieve? I think I want to achieve. I want to make this industry a better place for people to come and earn a living. I think we've been lucky as an industry to have had just incredible talent come and work in and around us, but it's never been more competitive in terms of attracting people to come and work in communications agencies. So part of the job is to try and work with the IPA member agencies, and maybe beyond that, to help continue the progress that we're already making as an industry, and I suppose to try and do a few tangible things, some actions which I can look back on and say, we did some things that did move things forward, that made this a better industry to work in, and helped agencies attract better talent and train better talent and keep better talent.
Love it. Really looking forward to seeing what happens at your time there.
I've said that out loud now.
Got to do it now.
Yeah, it's the other thing I should say is I think, the the IPA's got quite a difficult job, and I have not been afraid to. I sit on the IPA council, and those who know me will know I've not been, I'm not afraid to share my views on our industry. I think whilst I love it and it's brilliant, we've got a lot of distance to cover to become the kind of industry I think we should be. But you've got to be on the inside to make a difference. And so, those people that have witnessed me have sort of overly emotional blowouts at the IPA council meetings and probably speak not very eloquently about stuff I believe in quite strongly, will know that that if you're in it, you can make some change, and if you're not in it, it's harder. So I had to make that decision. Do I want to be on the outside, sort of going, oh, this industry's not where it needs to be, or do I want to be on the inside of the IPA game? Come on then. So what are we going to do? What are we going to do?
That we will see. We'll find out.
Yeah,
I'm really looking forward to it. No, well, looking at what you've done at Havas, I think it looks really positive. So definitely exciting what's going to happen there. I'm going to read a quote from Vicky Maguire, who is
my creative partner in crime. She's Chief Creative Officer of Havas London, and she's the person I spend most of my life with these days, frankly, other than my family.
And she says, we're wrapping up now, we're summarising your life. She says, wow, you can be a human about you. Wow, you can be a human in this industry and still be at the top of your game. Still know what you're doing. Still be inspirational, but not be an idiot. I've changed the last word there to censor it a little bit. And I think that's what you're sort of emanating into this world and to other people, is that there is a different way to be a leader. There is a different way to be a CEO, and that will change a lot of people's lives. And I think that the whole next generation, of CEOs and of leaders will be massively influenced by today's CEOs and leaders. So how you and others behave is really affecting the future. And I think you're showing that there is another way to do things, that you can be caring, you can be honest, you can be vulnerable, you can speak your mind and have a point of view without being an idiot. And I think that's super, super cool. I think it's very inspiring. I think keep doing it, keep speaking your mind.
Feels awkward sitting listening.
Just wait, you've got another poem coming. But yeah, keep it up. I love to see how things are going to turn out the next few years.
Thank you, and thank you for bothering to ask to talk to me and bothering to listen. And I think if I could just say one thing in response to that, my biggest nervousness is that people think I'm any different from them. I am deeply flawed human like everybody else, and it's I think people go, oh, Zav's got some principles, or look, let's all, I don't like. I can't emphasize enough, every day I have to make decisions. Sometimes I make the wrong one, sometimes I make the right one. So I think, like the only things you can really take out of this conversation are that actually you can run a better business by looking after your people, and that you can only really do your job to the best of your ability if you do it your way, not the way someone else told you to do it. Everyone's got that within their gift. Don't take people around you for granted. And I don't want. I think the worst thing that can happen here is people think, well, God, you've got to hold yourself to such high standards here. I kind of, I'm half, I'm terrible at all kinds of things, and I continue to stuff up and learn from it along the way. I continue to be worried about whether I'm doing my job well enough, and I know that sometimes I don't, and I'm paranoid about having this sort of, purposeful thing that's associated with me, because you can't live up to it, and so I sort of say to people, don't try to set that you don't need to be unrealistic, or you just got to try doing one more thing in a more impactful way, and then see how it goes.
I think that's great advice.
Yeah.
And that's
Brilliant advice.
just keep doing things and stop talking, keep actioning, and you seem to do that one by one to keep. Look forward to the next one and the one after that. Can we finish?
I don't know
on
what you're gonna. Yeah.
Can we finish on how's your daughter doing now?
Yeah, she is 21. Well, first of all, I should say I've got three daughters, and I'm proud of them all, and they're all doing brilliantly, and they've all had their own challenges and journeys to go on, as has my wife as a part of all of this, as have I. So we move as a unit, and of course increasingly with independent factions as my sort of strongly independently minded daughters grow into women and go off and live their own lives. But the daughter I referred to, Sadie, she's 21. She'll be 22 soon, and she spent 2 years in a psychiatric unit, which is unusually long period of time. But she made it through, and she is now at Camberwell Art School, so part of UAL, University of the Arts London. She did her art foundation last year. She's doing a degree in sculpture now, and she is a wonderful, effervescent, independently minded, autistic woman who is just as wonderful as my other daughters, and just as much of a pain in the yeah, there you go. My oldest daughter's about to finish her training to become a teacher, and my littlest one's going to go and do a course in filmmaking. So I'm proud of them all, and my wife and I, but in particular my wife, has been the person that's held it all together.
Beautiful, lovely to hear. Thank you for sharing that. Okay, we end with the poem. We start with the poem. We end.
I made this.
I love poems, by the way, but just probably not about me.
Well, I made this as we were going through as well, so you would have seen me scribbling here and there. So, from a story from Crystal Palace, we've heard it all here from the start, and how doing the right thing will always allow luck to play its part. Now, our guest has described himself as down to earth, so you won't find him in the attic, while also we can get anywhere we want as long as we stick at it. Passions and following your dreams can always get you noticed, as long as you feel the benefits of senior feedback that can allow you to keep your focus. Seeing other leadership styles, he decided to go with what is truly him and what is pure, while also leading the way within leadership, showing all his staff how to endure. And also, by being truthful, you can enact the best policy, and you can always keep a clearer head when you choose to use honesty.
Amen. Thank you very much. I don't know what to say really. Truthful is a good word. Truthful is a good word.
Love it. Thank you very much for coming, and look forward to seeing what happens next.
Cheers.